So this is the third day of this 4-day retreat here in the Franciscan Center in Tampa. Becoming intimate with life, moment-to-moment mindfulness. And before we return to the subject matter of this intensive, I want to say a few words about tomorrow morning. For those of you who have not been on retreat before, on the last morning of retreat, we traditionally have a little different sort of ceremony than our usual chanting service, which involves either reciting or transmitting the Three Refuges and the 5 precepts or mindfulness trainings of the Buddhist tradition. So let me just say a few words about that, or this. Going back to the time of the Buddha, when in the early days, as people began to become followers and students of the Buddha, they would ask him, the same way we have various kinds of rituals or ceremonies to denote significant passages in life, such as birthdays or weddings or funerals or graduations and things like that. They said, what sort of ceremonial or ritualized process do we need to go through, or can we go through, that would kind of clarify to us that we are now your students, your followers. So I guess the Buddha reflected on this, since this was the beginning, and he basically came up with a very simple formula, which has continued to this day for 2,600 years. And the simple formula is the transmission of what are called the Three Refuges, and traditionally the 5 precepts, or in the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, they're called the 5 mindfulness trainings. Well, let me say first about the refuges. We have been reciting the refuges, or a variation on the refuges, every morning. Reciting them is different than having them transmitted to you and receiving them. Obviously, the transmission and the reception of is a more formal acceptance and commitment that one makes in terms of how one wants to live one's life. The Three Refuges are really essential. Again, one can, practice meditation, practice mindfulness. One can study Buddhist teachings, philosophy, psychology, etc. The same way one can do the same with many other religions and paths. But it's sort of like dating. One can, date forever. And that probably could be enjoyable. But usually it's at some point people want to settle down with someone because there are advantages to that. So it's sort of like that. So what does it mean to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha? Again, it's like everything else in Buddhism. It has many, many shades of meaning, and there could be a whole retreat on that, on taking refuge. But let me just say, to guide us in this life, to guide us from a world of delusion and suffering and confusion, to guide us into how to lead a truly meaningful, happy, purposeful, compassionate, loving, etc. kind of life. We might call that enlightened life. One needs something to trust, something we have confidence in to guide us and support us along that journey to awakening. And what it means to take refuge in the Buddha, it's sort of a two-level. On one hand, we have the historical Buddha, and we have this lineage in Buddhism actually, of teachers that have transmitted and live, we could say, live the life of the Buddha until this day. So acknowledging that lineage that goes back to the Buddha, and acknowledging the lineage of teachers, living teachers to this day who are exemplars of leading an awakened life. We go to refuge to them. We trust them. We have confidence in them to guide us. And concurrently, to take refuge in the Buddha, because Buddha simply means the one who is awakened, awakened to their true mind, their Buddha mind. We acknowledge, as is fundamental to Buddhism, that each and every one of us have the potentiality for Buddha, to become a Buddha, because each of us has this original mind, unsullied, pure, and has the unmediated capacity for profound wisdom and compassion and loving kindness without doing anything. So acknowledging both of these things is to have confidence and to place one's trust in the Buddha, to take refuge in the Dharma. These are the teachings and practices that have been taught by the original Buddha, as we are accessing in this retreat. But in Buddhism, there is a long up to this present day, active life of teaching and practice that is available to us. We don't have to go it alone. We don't have to make it up. We don't have to rely on untested methodologies. The Dharma has been a source and a resource of wisdom and practical experience for 2,600 years, and has been tested into this present day by generations upon generations of all different kinds of people everywhere in the world, and have found it is something that can be relied upon. It is trustworthy. When you trust and have confidence in the Buddha and the Dharma, you can relax. All you have to do is be a good student. You just have to walk the path. And if you have trust and confidence in your guide, and you have trust and confidence in the map, and you have trust and confidence in that you got a good pair of walking shoes and good equipment, you can just enjoy the journey. The third refuge is refuge in the Sangha, the community of practitioners. In traditional Buddhism, this is called the Fourfold Sangha, or practicing community made up of laymen and lay women like ourselves, and nuns and monks who have a different ordination than what we're talking about. Many more rules, and they follow a very different lifestyle than lay people. But to take refuge in the Sangha means that one acknowledges the importance of having a community of practitioners, fellow practitioners that one is in relationship to. The community of fellow practitioners is a community of spiritual friends. We have in our life many friends of different types and family of different types, but not all of them, or many of them, don't really share perhaps the values and the intentions and aspirations that have touched our lives. So in the same way we have other types of friends and families, it's important that we have spiritual friends who are walking this journey with us. The spiritual community, the Sangha, supports us. It guides us. It offers their friendship to us. And as well as Sangha is a good place to practice. Because even though we have the best intentions to live in harmony and love with others, because of our conditioning and our egocentricity, we can bring a lot of our stuff to our spiritual community. So in Sangha, in spiritual community, we have an opportunity to really actualize our desire to learn how to live truly in harmony, with deep respect and love with our fellow beings. Obviously, that is our wish for the world. But we have to start somewhere. So we start with our spiritual community. Because if we can't found it with like-minded people who share the same practice and the same goal, then the task for the world is hopeless. So that is why it's so important that we create spiritual communities that really where the values are lived and not just talked about. So that is in a nutshell. I'm not sure what kind of nut. Anyhow, the Three Refuges. The 5 precepts, and I call them the 5 precepts because if you access or if you've been involved with other types of Buddhism or read about Buddhism, they're called the 5 precepts. Thich Nhat Hanh has based his 5 mindful training on the 5 precepts. So I just want you to understand this is the transmission of the 5 precepts. They're just formulated a little differently and called something in the Thich Nhat Hanh tradition, and that'll be the tradition that I'm transmitting in. But please understand you are receiving the 5 Buddhist precepts. And they really relate to kind of what we have already been doing here. We practice mindfulness of the body. We practice mindfulness of feelings. And we practice mindfulness of, as we will be learning about this morning, mindfulness of the mind, because this is basically these are the areas of experience that we are established in as human beings. And you remember in the introductory words of the Buddha, he says one of the reasons we practice mindfulness, the 4 establishments of mindfulness, is for purification. We want to rid our body and mind stream of the contaminants, the things that are toxic to it, the things that cause it harm. And in the formulation of the 5 precepts or the 5 mindfulness trainings, we have some very simple and basic guidance in how to live a life that is pure, and how to stop living a life that is impure. The fundamental kind of thrust of the 5 mindfulness trainings or precepts is quite simply to stop doing harm. To stop doing harm to our bodies, to our minds, and to others through our bodies and our speech and our mind. So therefore, these 5 mindfulness trainings or precepts deal with the body, how not to use the body as an instrument for harm, of violence, and to learn to use the body to protect life. Not to use the body to take what doesn't belong to us, but to use the body to be protective of the basic needs of all beings. It teaches us about our body in relationships to the things it touches in life, such as sexuality, such as the things we consume, whether they be drug, alcohol, food, or things we consume through our senses, all kinds of media. It gives us caution. So we do not use these things to harm our body or to harm others, but to use these as instruments of goodness. And finally, the last precept or training relates to words, and how words can be agents of harm, agents of suffering, agents of a delusion, or can be the opposite. And so living one's life according to these trainings or precepts is a significant step in detoxifying the body, speech, and mind of its impurities, and making sure that from now on, in the relationship to these 5 areas of life, we are only creating the basis for goodness. The ceremony and the 5 trainings and the refuges are found in this book, Chanting from the Heart, and that's where we'll be working from tomorrow. We will leave some copies. I see there's a copy over there on the stand. I'll put my copy if anybody else has a copy, so we'll leave copies over there for people who are unfamiliar with them or want to become more familiar to look at them today. Also, I'm asking Charlie and Darlene if you would facilitate at 6:30 tonight in the room upstairs down the hall at the end, a discussion for anybody who is interested. And again, for those who attend, you can attend it because you want to, because you think you are going to take the transmission tomorrow, or you're just interested in learning more about. There will be opportunity. Hopefully, you'll have looked at them during the day, and this will be an opportunity to ask any questions you may have. Again, attendance at the meeting does not, mean that you are taking transmission tomorrow morning. Now, I know many of you have received transmission in the past, but if there are participants here who do want to receive transmission, please, by the end of this evening's sitting, leave a note to that effect in the bell. In that note, you will say your name, you will give your address and your email address, and you will give a short 2, 3, 4, 5 sentence statement of your spiritual aspiration. That is because one of the things, a little perk you get for those of you who receive transmission, is that you will receive from me an ordination certificate. It is traditionally in Buddhism that when one receives as a layperson the 3 refuges and the 5 mindfulness trainings, one is now considered an ordained lay follower of the Buddhas. This goes back to the Buddha's time because one has received this ordination ceremony. And so you will get a certificate by me, and in that certificate, I will choose for you a Dharma name. Traditionally, when one enters the Buddhist family, one receives, in the same way when you entered your biological family, your parents gave you a name. In the same way, when you enter the Buddhist family, you're given a name. Any questions? Yes.
Can you re-up?
Yeah. So So 2 questions that people often ask is there may be people here who have taken transmission in the past, but feel either for lack of recitation or lack of practice or whatever, they want to retake them. That is fine. If you're going to do that, just simply put your name on a piece of paper, because you've already, had the ordination, you've already received a name. We don't have to do that, but just put your name in, so we know that you will be in the ceremony. The other thing that people often ask, because there may be people here who have received transmission of the Three Refuges and the 5 trainings or precepts in other Buddhist traditions, and they may ask, can I then receive one in this tradition? And the answer is yes. On one hand, one doesn't go running around from teacher to teacher, collecting ordination certificates. That's not recommended. I guess one could do that. There's nobody going to stop you. But there are times in the course of one's spiritual journey when one may enter a new lineage in the Buddhist tradition, or align yourself with a new teacher, and it's very traditional to want to receive this basic fundamental transmission from that teacher and within that tradition. So again, that's okay too. Any other questions? Good. So 6:30 upstairs. Probably what I'd say is, for those of you who will be attending that meeting, please go to the front of the dinner line. For those of us who are not attending the meeting, we won't. Now that we've practiced mindfulness of Vedana, and today we'll learn about mindfulness of thoughts, we will be very careful if any kind of thoughts about who these people think they are getting to the front of the line. We will immediately change that into kind thoughts. Okay, so please, if you are going to be there tonight, just go to the front of the line, so you have time to eat your dinner mindfully, and then can make the meeting at 6:30. Good. So we are now going to continue our learning about and practice of these establishments of mindfulness. And today we will enter the world of mindfulness of the mind in the mind. But let me just say that I hope you're beginning to get that the practice of mindfulness at the level that the Buddha is teaching is not like a little add-on. Mindfulness is, as I said in the first day, is very prevalent in our society today as an add-on. Right? It's a little thing that it can enrich certain parts of our life. This is not what the Buddha is teaching. The practice of mindfulness, as the Buddha taught it, is just what Thich Nhat Hanh entitles his book. It is about transformation and healing. It is about a transformative, a reformulation of life. Whose life? Our life. Now, why do I say that? To live mindfully in the way the Buddha is teaching is the opposite of the way we have lived up to now. Up to now, like many people have spoken, their body is an unknown to them, or it's just an object to manipulate, either for sense gratification or primarily to appeal to others. Right? It is an object. It is not something that we are really identified with, nor is it something we truly experience as it really is. In terms of the world of feelings, positive, negative, and neutral, at the elemental level we talked about very much yesterday, we don't even know that exists. And relationship to our thoughts and our feelings, we're just lost in them. We think that's all there is, right? We're just swept away by our history, our conditioning, the feelings, the thoughts that arise. We think it's all real and true, and we're just, and our actions of body and speech are always coming from this swirl of reactivity based on our conditioning that we are primarily unconscious about. Right? We are lost at sea. The sea of our own conditioning, the sea of our own afflictive emotions, the sea of our own confusion and delusions. And so are most of the people we encounter. So you can see that no matter where we go, in our own homes, in our families, in our relationships, at work, in our society, we keep wondering, why is it kind of a mess? Why do people treat each other the way they treat it? Why have so many people doing ego games? Why do people have so much unhappiness, addictions, et cetera, right? It's because it is rampant, this delusion. And rather than stopping and kind of having a conversation about our mutual delusion, instead, we are just endlessly externalizing the process and going after objects, relationships, money, fame, the career. We're just endlessly focused out here and never stopping to wonder what the real issue is, that I'm not happy. Mindfulness is about the capacity that in relationship to one's body, in relationship to one's feelings, in relationship, as we will learn today, to thoughts, emotions, conditioning, memories, the whole thing, we are now mindful of, aware of, right? All this phenomena that has run us is now something, right, that we are observing, right? We stop running. We stop being driven by our conditioning, by our habit energy, right? We're always being driven, unconsciously driven, and we don't realize it until we see the results. And then we might say, what? How did I get here? Then we stop. Right? The addict, bottom after bottom after bottom, before they one day stop and go, how did I get here? Could it have been the very substance that I was so in love with that is the cause of my downfall? Right? Could it very well be these thoughts, these dramas, this self, this ego, this me and my, right, that I have so clung to my whole life is the very source of my suffering. The only way out of that is to be mindful of. So when you are living in mindfulness according to the teachings of the Buddha, as he is teaching us. This whole unfolding of our human experience is now occurring within the mirror of mindfulness. We are bringing this capacity of the mind that we have used very slightly to shine in all areas of our life. Is that clear? The more that you are living that way, which means you're living in awareness, you know what's occurring. You know what's occurring in your body. You know what feelings are arising in you. You know what type of thoughts, feelings, emotions, stories, melodramas. You're aware of it all. You see it all. And you can hold it in mindfulness. You hold it in awareness. And you have the capacity of either just only doing that, and then you have the capacity of doing various kinds of remedial activities. And you have the capacity of acting, interacting differently than you ever did in the past. So please understand that what the Buddha is presenting here is a radically different way of being alive and being human. And yet it is totally alive and human. It is probably the first time in our life that we really learned what it means from the inside to be a human being, to be in our bodies, to be in sensory experience, right? To notice what we're really feeling in a situation when our senses make contact with objects. We see how our conditioning is driving our mind and all these mental events and emotional events. And we can work with them skillfully within the laboratory of our own body-mind before we spew forth into the world our garbage. Is that clear? So this is not, the teachings, again, you can use it any way you want. I'm just saying the Buddha did not teach a little value additive to life. He taught a path, remember what he said in the beginning, right? This is a path to nirvana. This is the path to the cessation of suffering. This is the path that frees you from sadness and grief, from anxiety and fear. That's what this is about. I mean, we can water it down as much as we want. Right? But I just want to make clear, this is the Buddha undiluted. Is that clear? Some people drink their whiskey straight, some people water it down. This is the Buddha as he distilled it. So now we are in the third, where the Buddha explains to his disciples, how does a practitioner remain established in the observation of the mind in the mind? So again, please remember now when he's talking about mind here, he's talking about it as a sixth consciousness. Remember I said that's a little different than what we're used to. And so in the same way that the object, the eyes see sights, and the ears hear sounds, and the nose smells odors, and the mouth and tongue are aware of tastes, and the body feels and senses. The mind, the objects of the mind are, in a pure sense, thoughts, perceptions, emotions, memories, these and other types of what are called mental formations. Okay. These are the objects of the mind. Now, what will strike you as I begin to read is, and this again is very, well, let me read it first, and maybe it'll strike you too. So the Buddha, how does a practitioner remain established in the observation of the mind in the mind? And the Buddha says, answering his own question, when the practitioner's mind is desiring, the practitioner is aware my mind is desiring. When it's not desiring, they're aware my mind is not desiring. When their mind is hating something, they're aware my mind is hating. When the mind is not hating, they are aware my mind is not hating. When the mind is in a state of ignorance, they're aware my mind is in a state of ignorance. When the mind is not in a state of ignorance, they're aware my mind is not in a state of ignorance. When the mind is tense, they're aware my mind is tense. When the mind is not tense, they're aware my mind is not tense. When the mind is distracted, they're aware my mind is distracted. When the mind is not distracted, they're aware my mind is not distracted. When the mind has a wider scope, they're aware my mind has widened in scope. When the mind has a narrow scope, they're aware my mind has become narrower in scope. When their mind is capable of reaching a higher state, they're aware my mind is capable of reaching a higher state. When their mind is not capable of reaching a higher state, they're aware my mind is not capable of reaching a higher state. When the mind is composed, they're aware my mind is composed. When the mind is not composed, they're aware my mind is not composed. When the mind is free, they're aware my mind is free. When the mind is not free, they're aware my mind is not free. Now, does this just sound like a description of the mind that you've ever heard? Our description of the mind would be what? She hurt me. I've made a fool of myself again. I miss my kids. That drum guy is driving me nuts. Right? Our experience of our mind is endless stories about life and ourself. Is that clear? And the emotions that go along with it. If we were writing it, that's what we would be endlessly writing. Right? I have a lot of anxiety about my future. Right? I'm having a lot of difficulty dealing with aging. Right? I miss my dog who died. Right? I'm really angry at this person. I'm resentful of this one. I'm worried about this. I'm concerned about that. That's what we would write, right? If we wrote about our mind. Can you see, this is totally different. This comes from somebody observing their own mind and going, oh, right? I'm aware my mind is agitated. It is not peaceful. Right? I am aware that there is anger in my mind. Just generically. Right? I'm aware that there is desire, there's yearning in my mind. Right? We're into the story. I really like a new car. I can't decide between a Honda or a VW. Wow. Just can't even sleep these days. Can't make up my mind. I'm not even sure, should I pay cash or should I, should I take out a loan or, you know what I mean, right? That's our stuff. That's the big deal in our life. Not, I notice my mind has anxiety in it. It's not at peace. I can feel my mind is constricted. It's not open. And there could be 1,000,001 things that have constricted it. And those 1,000,001 things, that's what we're concerned about. We're not concerned that our mind is constricted. My heart feels closed, off. Right? So this way of relating to ourselves, in this case the mind, is radically different than the storyline relationship that most of us have. Right? We think going deeper is, I have this unresolved issue from with my father that still affects me to today, right? Those are our deep issues. And I don't, as I say, I was a therapist for 30 years. But this is much more fundamental. Because the Buddha would say, if you're not working it out at this level, and those of you who've been in therapy for many years will know, the issues never end. Right? Right? You end up being like Woody Allen, right? You're in therapy for 30 years. Right? And you're still going 3 times a week. Right? And when you have no longer issues with your family of origin, you now have issues that you're working out between you and your therapist. Right? There's no end to issues in this life. This is a life, if it's lived in a certain way, will always have issues. As long as we live in greed, anger, and delusion, we will always have issues. There is no end to it, because the fundamental energies of unskillfulness that are forming and informing our mind will always be creating issues. So please be aware that when the Buddhist, going back to the Buddha, looks at the mind, they look at these kind of what are called these mental formations, like desiring, craving, grasping, attachment, right? And the absence of. They look at things like hatred and anger and resentment and all that. And the opposite of. And they look at things like mind being expansive and open, and mind being constricted and tense. I could go on. In Buddhist psychology, there are usually about 50, between 40 and 50 enumerated. This one only has about 20. These mind states, these mental formations. Okay. So when we talk about observation of the mind in the mind, we are observing these formations and whether or not they are present in us. Right? You get it, Molly? So if you were looking at that issue you were talking about yesterday with that feeling resentful to that person or hurt because of what they said or didn't do, if you were practicing it in the way that we're talking about, mindfulness of the mind, you would be aware of what? Breathing in, I am aware that there is hurt in me, you might say, or Resentment in me. Yeah, anger. I'm aware that there's anger in me. Can you see? And that's the key piece. We think what the person did is the key piece. You see? And what we think about them is the key piece. But if that's where we're going, we're not somebody who's working on ourselves. Who are we working on? We're working on that person. Let's get straight here. There are many people in here who think, oh, I'm really in this life, I'm really working on myself. No, you're not. You're working on everybody else. Right? When Molly's working on herself, I'm aware there's hurt and anger has arisen in me. I can feel myself constricting. Let me be with that. Let me breathe with that. Let me take care of that in me. Right? Let me be mindful of what has arisen in me. Does that make sense? That's where you go first, and that's where you resolve it. Then, if there is something you want to share with that person to deepen understanding or communication, that's okay. But that's not where you're looking first. That's not where you're taking care of first. Usually first, who do we want to straighten them? We want to straighten them out. Right? In this practice, if we're practicing in the way the Buddha taught, there's only one person we need to straighten out. Do you know who that is? It's me. Right? Right, Tony? Got to get this guy straight. Right? When he's straight, then he can maybe help other people. But how can we help other people get straight if we're still so bent? Yeah. So it's like that. When their mind is not free, they're aware my mind is not free. Now again, it's very important to understand that in Buddhist teaching, Buddhist psychology, it is not a psychology of psychopathology, the way the Western psychology. It is a psychology that has a very clear model of wellness, right? Of health. That is the criteria, and so when it looks at things that disturb that or things that support that, that's where the judgment is. You see, it's like when you're looking and see, is my mind free or my mind not free? Is my mind bound or not bound? It's obvious if this is in the service of somebody who wants to what? Free their mind. If you don't care, right? This thing doesn't mean anything to you, right? Most people, if you said to them, when you see them so knotted up, and you said, is your mind free? Do you want to have a free mind? They'd look at you like you're crazy. What are you talking about? But it's an interesting question to somebody, I mean, if I said to you, Molly, forgive me for picking on you, but but you did volunteer, and I imagine you are someone who is willing to speak openly. If I said to you, Molly, do you want to be an angry person?
No.
No. I mean, Molly goes, no, I don't want to be an angry person. I mean, is anger an emotion that you want to cultivate on an ongoing basis? No. Right? So it's like that, right? And based on that, based on what you're saying, therefore, if you're very conscious and mindful, when you are aware that there is no anger in you, that feels good. Right? Oh, I'm living in the way I want. And when you perceive that anger has arisen in you, you will go, uh-oh, a contamination has entered my mind. I need to be careful now. I need to take good care of it, right? But that all comes from this initial aspiration you have for the kind of person you want to be, the kind of mind you want to have. Is that clear? I mean, the Buddha is talking to who here? He's talking to his disciples. He's talking to his students. People who could say, want to be like him. I want to be like you, Buddha. Right? So Buddha's saying, all right, I will share with you my mind. I will share with you how I practice, how I live. That's what he's doing. We're just kind of listening in, 2,600 years later. And then in the next paragraph, somewhat similar to the way he did with the other two, he says, this is how the practitioner remains established in the observation of the mind in the mind. Observation of the mind from the inside the mind, from the outside the mind, or observation of the mind from both the inside and the outside. Okay, so what are we saying? Watch your mind. Watch it from the inside, right? Feel what it's like. Be present to what's going on in your mind, but also from the outside. You can say, my mind is angry, right? My mind is constricted. That's kind of like inside outside, right? Inside, it's just an experience. Outside, we can kind of see it, like in the mirror or something. We can see what it is. Okay. So we're observing our minds. We are present to them. In the same way that we were present to our breath, present to our body, present to feelings, positive, negative, and neutral, now we are present to the thoughts, the perceptions, the mental formations, the emotions that are arising in our mind's awareness. Right? We're learning something that is going to be quite different for many of us, is to be mindful of our mind. To be able to take a step back and observe our mind and its processes. Can you see? I mean, in the same way, when we did our analysis of the body, remember? And we could go, what? Oh, I'm aware of my heart, I'm aware of my liver, I'm aware of my lungs, I'm aware of my neck, I'm aware, right? Oh, I can see all the parts of my body. Now we're looking at the parts of our mind. And we want to be able to see them as clearly. These are the formations. These are called mental formations. And we want to be able, through our mindfulness, to become aware of these mental formations in our mind, when they are present and when they are not present. The practitioner remains established in the observation of the process of coming to be in the mind, or the process of dissolution in the mind, or the process, or both in the process of coming to be and the process of dissolution. So this is exactly the same verbiage as in the other two. Right? So it is very important that we not only see the kind of the fact of what's occurring, but we see again what? Impermanence. Impermanence. Everything, right? Right. You are mindful of your breath, and you will know every breath is different. Every breath is different. It's always changing. You're mindful of your body and how it feels and the sensations in your body, and you'll notice what? It's always changing. It's always changing. Always changing. Always changing. Right? Yesterday, if you watch the river of feelings, positive, negative, neutral, you will notice what? It is a river. It is just endlessly flowing. Right? Just what, nothing is staying the same. Right? And as today you watch your mind, you will notice what? Have you noticed your mind, anybody, over the last 3 days? A lot of coming and going? Yep. A lot of coming into being of thoughts and feelings and emotions and formations, and they go, right? Come and go, come and go, come and go, come and go. So it's very important what the Buddha is teaching us to, see the big mindfulness, of birth and death, like we did the other night, but also this moment to moment that's going on in every area of what we call me. There's nothing solid. And the other interesting thing, of course, is what? None of it's under our control. Right? There's no self in any of this. Right? There's no self-breathing. There's no self in the body. There's no self controlling this river of feelings. And there's no self controlling these unceasing outpouring of thoughts, emotions, and feelings. They're just arising, passing away, according to causes and conditions. It's important that we see that. In the process of dissolution, the process of coming to be, or mindful of the fact there is a mind here. Just simply, there is a mind here. There's a body here. There are sensations here. As a fact. You see what he's saying? As a fact. It's the fact. Right? Remember? 76 degrees. It's a fact. Everything else, whether you're hot or cold, whether you enjoy it, whether you don't enjoy it, that's all subjective. That's not a fact. Right? But the fact that there is something called the mind here that's present, this is a fact, right? It's here. Whatever else I say about it is subjective, but it's a fact. We want to see the truth. Or is mindful of the fact there is a mind here until understanding and full awareness come about. Okay. So that again, in each of these areas, at the end of the process, the Buddha is saying we practice this until we what? Until we get it. When you get it, you'll know it. He or she remains established in the observation, free, not caught up in any worldly consideration. Again, this is the power of mindfulness, right? We don't judge, right? Right, Charna? So when you're aware, there's anxiety in me, or my conditioned fear of pleasing others, and blah, blah, blah. I don't mean to minimize it, but you know what I'm talking about. You know that blah, blah, blah. You're just, right? You're not impressed by it. You're not ashamed by it. There's no worldly consideration attached to it. You're just aware. There it is. Right? And is it a mental factor at that moment that supports you, or is it a mental factor that contaminates? No. Right? So it is something that you want to heal and transform. No, that's all. You're like a medical person, right? That's all, right? When somebody comes in and, you just work with them, right? That's all. You don't have to make a judgment, do you? About the person, they come in because they fell down the step and they get this big gap in their head. Go on and on about, I want this idiot. I don't want to waste my time dealing with people who fall down the stairs and split their heads open. Right? Right? You just get to work, don't you? That's all. That's what it means. Right? The practitioner remains established in the observation. The observation of all the stuff. Free. Not caught up in any worldly consideration. Worldly consideration, again, is what? Bad, good, right, wrong, should be, shouldn't be, want it to be, don't want it to be. Right? Right? That's all worldly consideration. That's not the mind of somebody who seeks liberation. That's the mind of somebody who wants to stay stuck in delusion. Huh? You see? Because you're just what? You're just amplifying it, right? I mean, it starts off without even you doing anything as just an immediate kind of vedana that immediately becomes anxiety, that immediately has these thoughts, right? And your job is simply what? Yeah, and you stop it by not stopping it, by being mindful of it. You see what I'm saying? That stops it because you're no longer feeding it. Now, if you start then judging yourself for having this, as we do, we're just reinforcing it and adding a whole nother layer. Does that make sense? So we want to. This is very important. He's kind of giving us the practice, but now telling us that how to do it. Be an observer. Be free. Which means not caught up in any worldly consideration. How it should be, or I don't want it to be, this is what? A worldly consideration. It is. I mean, that's all. That's the fact. Right? The fact is, in this moment, you're dizzy? Little. So I'm aware there's a little, that's all. Right? And there'll be times when you'll be aware, I'm aware that there's no dizziness in me. And there'll be times when you might say, I'm aware there's a lot of dizziness in me. That's a fact. And you want to be able to observe that fact freely. Right? And mindfulness of breath gives you a way to do that. Right? Is everybody clear? It's now as if each of us have someone to deeply observe. Anybody here ever do research? When you do research, you are usually told that you have to be very careful of not contaminating the results. What is the worst way you can contaminate results? Besides cheating and lying and making stuff up.
Make a presumption about it.
We'll make a presumption. What?
With your own opinion, Joe.
Right. You're inserting yourself in it. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, a good researcher is totally objective and is very careful, right, never to assert themselves, because if you assert yourself in any way, you are contaminating the results, right, or have the potential. So this is what that's about, right? We want to learn to just be very objective observers, just of ourselves. And we are not just a cold, disinterested observer. We're a compassionate observer. We're an understanding observer, because again, this is all we are doing this, right? Because we want to be liberated. So there is a process we're involved in, which is very meaningful, as opposed to other kinds of researchers. Yes.
I'm trying to think how this connects to another practice. There's the practice that I've heard many times of talking to her being the ego, and when she, or the imagined self, and when she gets out of hand and she starts believing something very specific, talking in specifics, and yet this seems much more objective than that. This is the mind is agitated, not okay, I need to tell you this is what you're doing. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
One is very specific, one is much.
Well, I'd say to you it's like this, Susan. So the question is, this seems very objective and very direct, but what about all that stuff, the inner child stuff, or talking to your, or talking to this part of you, what about that? Susan, you have nieces and nephews. How old are they?
Many of them, but my goddaughters are 8 and 11.
Okay, so let's take your 8-year-old. And who are your oldest ones?
My
Your oldest niece and nephews?
Oh, my oldest is 13.
Okay. And isn't there a baby too?
Actually, I'm thinking of my grand nieces and nephews. There's a baby who's 1.
Oh, okay,
and
good.
And my oldest niece is actually in her 30s.
There we go. Good. So we have a range. So let me ask you something, Susan. If your 1-year-old or 5-year-old is suffering, unhappy about something or going through something, and your 31-year-old is going through something, do you talk to them in the same exact way? No. Why not?
Their ability to understand.
Okay. So oftentimes when we first get in touch with these parts of ourselves, it's like that. You know, it's kind of new and they're out of control and they're babies or they're 5-year-olds. You know what I mean? So oftentimes that's the way we need to relate to them. So this is like a little older. You know, it depends on you and it depends on them what works. Okay? It's like that. And yeah, so we have to be careful, you know, that we don't get into cookie cutter. You know, that's what's often confusing about Buddhism, because Buddhism is a teaching based on upaya, or skillful means, which means it is always appropriate to the person in the situation. So that's why it's often confusing, because if you read a lot of Buddhism, you go, hold on a second. Over here it says, you know, that the child within, you know, you're supposed to be compassionate and hold it to you, and you know all this. And over here it's saying, you know, simply just be mindful, and you know what I mean. And you know, the content of the story and the past is irrelevant. Just, you know, and you go, aren't these obviously in clear distinction? And the truth is no, because it's both and, it's not either or. Our dualistic mind goes, well, it can't be this, but it's, can you see, from a point of view of skillfulness and appropriateness, something that's appropriate in this situation may be inappropriate in that situation. Something that's appropriate for this person may not be appropriate for that person. So we want always, in our work with others, but even with our work with ourselves, to be skillful. So if you are practicing this way, and you're finding some kind of emotional something is going on, and you just can't hold it in that way, right, then you may, you know, begin that kind of compassionate dialogue with that part. Right? But the important thing is it works the other way too, which is, you know, once that part of you has grown up a bit, you know, you have to remember she's now 31, so you still don't talk to her like she's a baby, right? It goes both ways. Any other question? Yes.
Could you say something about the pursuit of pleasure?
The pursuit of pleasure. You mean the Buddha began with desire?
Is that desire to pursue pleasure?
Well, we could say the desire for pleasure. I'm just trying to use the same words that are often found in the Buddhist teaching, right? So we know that it's a very much a part of being a human being to have desire, right? To desire something, to want something, we could say, right? Now the question is, when does desire, which we'd say is human, right, become grasping, clinging, attachment? Right? That's the problem. Because when you are in the world of clinging, grasping, attachment, you have entered the world of suffering. The harmony and peace of your mind is disturbed, and the focus of your energies is now, you know, moving very strongly toward one object. Okay. And so we would say, in terms of the cultivation of equanimity and peace of mind and calmness and openness and all these other things, that is now being lost. So, as lay people, we exist in the world of things. And things, as you learned yesterday, Tim, right? When the body and the senses contact an object and perceive it as positive or pleasurable, we know what? There's a natural movement in the direction of. We want it to continue, right? So we would say that is normal. But there has to be some kind of intervening mindfulness that is aware of what's going on and can work with that desire so that it doesn't do any harm. Which means it takes us after objects or situation or people or experiences that are harmful to our own peace of mind or equilibrium, or where we want to be going in life, right? Or creating harm for somebody else. So again, there is nothing inherently wrong with desire. There's nothing inherently wrong with pleasurable. I mean, right? I mean, pleasure is one of the good things in life, isn't it? And actually, in working with your Vedana, part of the process is being able to turn a lot of neutral experiences into pleasurable ones, right? By being present, by noticing, by bringing in other kinds of aspects of the mind into the situation, such as appreciation, gratitude, things like that. Immediately one has a good sense. So the experience of pleasant experiences of the body and of the mind is wonderful. It's what makes life rich. But we have to be careful, because like you're, I think, bringing up, it can turn into, kind of a very kind of obsessive kind of desire thing, which can then turn into, grasping, clinging, attachment, and that is a path to suffering, according to the Buddhist tradition, because one's losing, again, one's inner peace, one's inner stability, and one is kind of pursuing something, because Tim, the downside of pleasant is that it is impermanent. Right? Anybody notice that? Coming back to our ice cream analogy. You want ice cream, right? Molly, you keep coming to mind. Molly, but her eyes lit up when I said the word ice cream. So the first bite is, how's the first bite?
Good.
Good. How's the second bite?
Even more delicious.
Third bite? Fourth bite? Fifth bite? Sixth bite? See, at some point, there will always be diminishing returns. Because that is just the nature. Because in Buddhist psychology, which, as Alex pointed out, is quite profound, the meditators very closely analyze moment by moment, millisecond, what it is like when a sense makes contact with an object. And actually, that actual experience, and they actually could see very clearly that there is an excitation at the first contact, but over time it diminishes. So they saw the, we could say, sort of the, the hook in the bait, right? And you notice that. Anybody here ever get anything new? Right? New clothes, new car, new stove, new relationship, right? You know what I mean? Right? New job. How is it in the beginning? It's wonderful. It always is wonderful. Over time, what happens? Remember the new car feeling, right? When you drive, all you want to do is drive around, right? It's the most wonderful thing in the world, right? 2 months later, notice if you're still getting that same. No. it's diminishing. All pleasure is like that. Okay. So that is why, in Buddhism, the purpose of life being the pursuit of pleasure is basically the purpose of life being a pursuit of pain, because it will cause that eventually. And it is endless. Because if your purpose in life is always to have pleasant experiences, because every pleasant experience will sooner or later, and usually it's much sooner than later, end, right? Then you always have to what? Keep running, right? It's endless. And at the end of the day, you may have accumulated in the course of your life 1 million pleasant experiences, and at the end of that 1 million, you'll still be in the same place when you began, which is what's next. Is that clear? So that is why it's not because pleasure is bad, you see, that you see in the Buddha's teaching, kind of putting a caution mark, saying, yeah, it's, pleasant is pleasant. Enjoy it in the moment. But also there has to be some wisdom, some kind of mediation that kind of sees what's going on, right? Or else again, you'll be eating the ice cream long beyond the point where you're full, because you'll still be trying to extract every last bit of pleasure out of it, right? I mean, people will eat until they're sick, right? They're so full they're sick. Right? I mean, what's that about? Well, we know what that's about. Yes.
I was thinking, in our culture, we're constantly being offered all kinds of pleasure.
Oh, yeah.
That, Howard Johnson offers 28 varieties of ice cream.
Well, I think you're dating yourself with that one. But I remember that too. But I don't even know if Howard Johnson's around anymore, Tim. I'm sorry. Talk about impermanence. But go on.
But the idea is that you can't eat 28 varieties. You're not going to do it.
Right.
And everything's being consistent.
Right, because that is the realm of what? I mean, that is the realm of people marketing their products, and they understand what? They understand us, and we are driven by the pleasure principle, right? So every ad you'll see will be in some way appealing to your, what gives you pleasure, whether it's taste, whether it's being perceived as young, whether it's being fast and powerful. You know what I mean? So we are endlessly being manipulated. If you want to stop being manipulated, you can either, just cancel the newspaper and stop listening to TV and the internet and everything, or you can practice mindfulness. Because when you are mindful and you have understanding, you will see this, and you won't be attracted. But you'll understand it's just an image, and there's no truth there. So you won't be fooled. Right? So in Buddhism, for the practice, at our level of practice, it's not about desire is bad, or things are bad, or pleasure is bad. It's not that. It's, with mindfulness and with understanding, you can live in the world of 28 flavors. Right? 50 flavors, 100 flavors. And just take what you want, or not take it at all. You're not fooled anymore. You see the hook in the bait. The fish that gets caught is the one that only sees the bait. But if you see that delicious looking worm, and you look carefully, you'll see the hook. And if you see the hook, you won't bite, right? You'll just keep swimming. Unfortunately, when you turn around, you may see somebody in your school has just gotten hooked. They took the bait, didn't they? And that's the way it is. Lots of people are taking the bait, yes.
Then you would feel
and I've known for 25 years, and what Molly talked about, my experience. So through the mindfulness, it seems like over time, when my friend, when I feel anger or sadness, I say, oh, there she goes again, saying those things. And I don't feel quite as intense with sadness and anger.
Mm-hmm. So let's come back, okay? So there is this friend, and she does what?
She's very judgmental.
Well, that's, again, I'm asking you, what did she do? See, again, judgmental is the way we're playing it in our mind. Okay, what did she actually do?
She told me that I don't use adverbs in the right place.
Stop.
This is true.
Well, I believe that. I've never heard that one before. So she accused you of not using adverbs in the right place. Okay. And you took affront at that. You obviously are a woman who takes her adverbs very seriously. Well, you know, there were many interesting ways to go with this one, Bob. But we'll leave that for you and your therapist. But let me. So. Okay. So again, there are interesting ways of working this one. But let's just say, again, we're dealing with this teaching and this sutra, very basic and very okay. So when your friend says to you that you are using your adverbs incorrectly, okay, in that moment when she said that, in that very moment when your ears heard her say that, what was the Vedana? What was the immediate response? Positive, negative, or neutral?
Negative.
Negative. Okay. If you're practicing mindfulness, right, over time, you will get to see that your immediate response is a negative, right? We know that when we perceive something immediately as negative, we want to either stop it or get away from it or do something. So what happened next inside you? Where did that immediate negative, did that begin to blossom into a thought? Did that begin to blossom into an emotion?
It blossomed into a story.
Okay, and we will call that thoughts. And the story, just very simply in one sentence or two sentences, your mind created a story about...
I was raised in an Italian family, and their English wasn't that great.
Okay. So, so you're tying it into this formation. We call these mental formations. There are many of them. So you, let's say, have a mental formation, having grown up in an immigrant family, whose English was not that great. Maybe it was an issue in the family, or people made fun, or there was an embarrassment. Right, okay. So there is an issue within you, a formation in you, right? Mm-hmm. Which in this friend's words got connected. Okay, and now this incident is now tying into that historical story based on your conditioning. And if I said to you, that story, which are words going on in your mind, the Vedana connected when you feel this story. Remember the story about being an immigrant family, English not good, maybe people not accepting you, making fun of you, something embarrassment. Is that a positive or negative for you? Negative. So now can you see the negative is growing?
Yes.
Right. And then what sort of emotion begins to rise up in you?
Not good enough.
Yeah, well, that's a thought. But again, though I'm not good enough. But what is that when you are not good enough?
Sad.
Sad. Right? Is that sadness a positive experience for you? No. More negative. You don't like being sad. Then you notice anger begins to arise. At who? Her. Because you're now thinking, she's the cause of my suffering. But your suffering is arising from your own internal formations. Can you see that? Yeah. But if we don't stop in the way we're talking and be willing to go, yeah. I mean, because we all laughed, you see, when you said that thing about adverbs, because like, I mean, who would ever even think like, care about that, right? But obviously, can you see how it tied into this very deep kind of wounding in your family? Can you see? And all right, and so transformation and healing. So now there's an opportunity. If you can hold that whole process in mindfulness to see, yeah, I need to bring healing and understanding to this part of myself that's still wounded after all these years, right? Because obviously you have gone on in life, obviously you've gotten educated, and obviously you no longer speak in the broken English of an immigrant family, right? Is broken English normal in an immigrant family? Of course. Okay. So that's, can you see, but if we do not take care of, through mindfulness and awareness and other ways, these parts in ourselves, like you say, you're just, going through life, and all of a sudden somebody doesn't like the way you use adverbs, and rather than, I mean, I don't know, I guess if somebody said to me, Fred, you got to look at the way you use adverbs, I would probably stop and go, thank you. I've never really, to be honest with you, I probably, since about 4th grade, I've never even thought about it, adverbs, or whenever we, 7th grade, or whenever it was, I mean, it's like, that's interesting. You know what I mean? It would just be a thing of curiosity. But the fact that it, again, this is what mindfulness of feelings, mindfulness of the mind, of emotions, mental formations, will reveal to you. And you can then heal yourself in one way. And 2, it no longer becomes a problem between you and your friend. Right? Because now there's suffering between this,
So by that awareness, there's no longer at all.
No, it doesn't. No, not at all. Because you just see it for what it is, and you understand. You understand the roots of your response. Oh, and so like Sharner, you're not upset with yourself or surprised. You go, oh yeah, I can. Yeah. Oh, I get it. Yeah, I grew up in an immigrant family. This was the issue, and I still have this formation. I still haven't healed it. So, wow. So I'm in that sense, you're happy that your friend pointed out your use of adverbs, because it let you see, oh, there's still a place where I'm still, back in time. And so that becomes a transformative experience, as opposed to just another nail in the coffin of afflictive emotions that we just carry around with us. Is that clear?
Yes.
Good. Okay, we'll go 5 minutes, and then I want to have a little walking meditation. Yes.
Just to follow on to that, so analysis can take place at the Vedana level from these readings, but when you get to the mind level, that's where you try to deal with it more broadly. The mind is agitated, rather than going into the kind of analysis that you just did.
Again, analysis, I think, is not the right word. I mean, I think looking deeply, the way Thich Nhat Hanh says, or insight, is probably better, because it doesn't have to be a head thing. I mean, in other words, if Barb stops and she just feels that pain of what happened, it'll seem familiar to her, and pretty quickly she'll go, oh yeah, it's that one. It's kind of an ancient one. Right? And so you don't need a lot of analysis. It's often just by being present to what's going on, you can uncover. So I like, the word of looking deeply, because it really just kind of means I'm just kind of looking deeply as opposed to kind of thinking about and figuring it out. Again, if this is like an epiphany for Barb, then she needed a little of that looking deeply. But hopefully, once she gets it, in the future, every time somebody points out her misuse of adverbs, she'll smile. right? I mean, it won't be a big deal because she's kind of got it. You know what I mean? So it's not like you have to keep doing this forever. It's like once you get it, then it's just kind of residue, right? Like once Charna gets it, oh, that's just, that's just my conditioning, blah, blah, and she understands her childhood, and she understands how she's reinforced. It's like, oh, and so in the future, when somebody taps her on the shoulder and tells her she's late, and she gets that little, that little first, if she's mindful, she'll know, there it is again. Yeah, that's I understand why it's there. You understand, once you understand, you can relax. Oh, I understand why, it's not about your use of adverbs, it's about all that other stuff. Yeah, right? So, you think it's about you're humiliated, embarrassed because you're late for the meeting, but it's all that other stuff. From childhood and everything else. I mean, that's what's... Is that clear? And then you went, oh, I understand. Yes.
These are very powerful teachings, and they need to be powerful because you're up against some very powerful forces, seduction, defenses, imprinting that goes back a long, long time. And
Alex, I do not like it when you talk about these things as very powerful.
They are powerful.
They're only as, without sounding trite, they're only as powerful as you let them be. Now again, look at Barb. It was, in that moment, was her conditioning powerful? Yeah, took her right over. Right? Took her right over. But at one moment of mindfulness and clarity, and they dissolve. So to me, I would say, powerful and not powerful at all. Okay, is that clear? It is only powerful when you don't understand what's going on. When you understand what's going on, mindfulness in and of itself changes, right? It changes things. And with insight and understanding, the tiger's defanged.
The reason I use the word powerful is because you use the term unconscious. This is unconscious conditioning. To me, that means that you're unaware of it. If it was conscious, then you'd be aware of it. So, to make yourself aware of something that's unconscious, it's unconscious for a reason. It's a habitual energy that you've used for a long time, you've accepted as being norm, and you're going to hold on to it, you're going to defend it, because there's something that's working, because you wouldn't do it if it wasn't working.
Really?
Well, in a perverted way it's working.
Well, I mean, this is
the habitual part of
Yeah, Alex, Dr. Lerner, let me explain to you, if you haven't gotten it yet. This is not a path of perversion. Okay, we are no longer... Right? You're absolutely right. That is perverted. Right? And you're absolutely right. But this is, when you can see it and name it as perversion, in that moment, there's clarity. And if you're clear that you are not walking a path of perversion, in that moment, all that unconscious energy, habit energy now becomes conscious. Unconscious just means not conscious. Right? There's no deep hidden mystery in all this. It's just simply, we are unaware of these habit energies that are driving us. And one moment of awareness, right? It's like turning on the light. Oh, now I see it. In that moment, you have the opportunity to be liberated. So that's why it bothers me when you say things like it's so powerful. It is only powerful because you're unconscious of it. But
the reason I brought it up is because when Barb first talked about, her friend deeply affecting her because of adverbs, we all laughed. we all were thinking, wow, that's a silly thing to be
Yes.
about. But for Barb, it was very serious
Because
it represented something that
Right.
was deep within her. What I'm trying to get at,
Yeah.
because you're so good when you make these presentations and you make them flow so effortlessly, what I'm trying to say is Barb really didn't understand it until she had a teacher guide her to the point where she could take over and then say, yeah, that makes sense. On her own, I don't think Barb would have gotten there.
Yeah, well, that's why we're grateful to have teachers in this world.
Yes.
I mean, I agree with you. But, but once you get the lesson, right? I mean, you were a doctor. I mean, did you know how to be a doctor on your own? No. So you went and found teachers. And hopefully, if you're a good student, when they showed you how to do something, right, you kind of learned. Now, you may not have been perfect. There may now be a learning curve to apply it. But hopefully, if it was a good teacher, now I see how to do that. It's over. Your ignorance is over. Now you're on a learning curve. So, I mean, if your ignorance of medical procedures was so powerful, you could have never become a doctor. But they weren't that powerful. They were just based on you didn't know.
Right.
It's as simple as that, Alex.
What I'm trying to say is that I think these teachings are so powerful because they're developmental. In other words, you can't take the training wheels off that first time. And you need a teacher to go ahead and to make sure that developmentally you're doing it okay.
Again, that there is a developed model. There's a very personal model, right? Some kids spend a long time on the training wheels. Some kids, it's a very brief movement to taking them off, and yeah, that's all. But they'll come off. Yes.
I had a moment. It made me think of this because what I hear is that we need the teacher, with the teachings, this is what happened to me, but Fred wasn't with me at the time. So this morning, for those of you in the dining room, I had a very real experience with the dining experience today that took me, it was fantastic. Thanks to Angie and her guided meditation instruction about the body and the postures that you, like if you're craving and you're leaning, or to be aware of that. So I noticed when I was eating, at the end, I just sat. Now I've really been practicing being satiated, feeling full, and which I haven't in the past, and it's wonderful. But then I really experienced, when everyone started leaving, I went right back into this memory as a child. And a lot of sadness, and I had this relationship with food back then, and that that it was taught, you finish your plate or everybody leaves. If you don't finish, and you stay until your plate is done, and usually they gave me too much to eat. I mean, and I was thinking, that's like judging them, and I went through this whole thing, and everybody left, and I had crying, emotional thing, and then I was just sat with it. And I said, okay, I'm going to hold this, and then I'm going to hold this and understand what this relationship is with this food, and then I realized that it's okay just to have that until it passed, and I had some nice Sangha members there. It was good. But then I left, and when I came back, I realized I came back to the dining room after I felt better. And I sat down again, and I just kind of said, what really is happening? There's a table, and there was a food, and there was a child. And they were just feeding me because they wanted me to eat. It wasn't of ill will or malice. My family didn't have, And, but I had that turned around as a kid, but I don't think I understood it as a child, But that's a very direct experience with food as you age, perhaps for me. So my relationship with food, now I can understand, you have choice as an adult, you don't have to eat, blah, blah, blah. But that's from this experience has helped me to see that. And I guess I'm just saying that You weren't there. I mean, you didn't have to walk me through that. But I think with mindfulness, I can see how I would never have experienced that before because it was in like my body. You know, I was sitting in a chair. My posture was the same. I was at a table like with family members. You see?
Yeah, we see.
So that was about the body experience too that we came to that memory.
Right. So again, just to sum up, just for the So what MT is relating is just her own experience this morning through mindfulness of being in touch with something that was going on inside her that seemed to have no relationship to what was going on, but when she just stopped and was willing to just be present deeply to what she was feeling and reaction, she was able, it just naturally, like Barb's, thing with her immigrant family, it just naturally, that came up, and she could see the antecedents of this current behavior and response. And it all works itself out. Mindfulness is if we can use it in the way the Buddha is saying, which is a willingness to be totally present, to be objective, to be observable, to not have any worldly considerations, bad, good, they're good, I'm good, they're bad, I was, and just, this was just what happened. It's not bad or good. It shouldn't have happened, or why are immigrant families made to feel? You know what I mean? You get into blah blah blah. It's like, oh no, this, and because you want to understand. Oh, this is good. So we should stop. Lunch is in about 7 minutes. Does everybody see the practice? Mindfulness of the mind. But again, you are. As you meditate, formally, as you go about your activities, first you're grounded in your body, you're grounded in your breath, and then like the feelings, you are observing your mind, right? Okay. And again, like we were just saying, rather than Barb going, "Wow, I'm really pissed off at my friend for hurting me that way," you would be mindful and go, I'm aware that there's anger in me. I'm aware there's sadness in me. You know what I mean? As well as to be aware, there's no anger in me. My mind is now free of anger. We want to feel what that's like and acknowledge that. So is that clear? You are now watching, observing your mind, but in this kind of, not so much in the story, but in the kind of general formation. My mind's peaceful. My mind is very relaxed. I'm aware as I breathe. My mind, or my mind is agitated. My mind is restless. My mind is tense. My mind is anxious. And you're just breathing in and out. I'm aware. Is that clear? And again, you're just, the same way you were mindful of your body, the same way you were mindful of feelings, you're learning just to kind of note and be present to, without any worldly considerations. And again, we're not really there yet, but, if you want to spend just a little looking deeply, like some of the people have shared, that kind of has just happened. Just to get a little practice in that, right, Alex? We need to just get practice. So you're not dependent on the teacher. I can't be hired to go live with you, or. Yes.
Are we still doing the Dharma as well?
Again, I would say, this is the problem with kind of doing it in this little time we have. I'm trying to give you an experience. I would say if you can see both going on, because they're usually concurrent. Usually if you're, Vedana, we could say is often the root. That very quickly, if we don't notice, what we notice is the blossoming, into the stories, into the emotions, into the thing. So it's it's again, I would say, if you don't catch it at that level, you could backtrack it and go, the first time I noticed immediacy, when I just noticed that I was dizzy, my first, response was aversion. I can see that, and then the stories began, and then you want to bring your mindfulness to just see what's really going on. Good. So it is now 3 minutes to lunch. So again, we'll probably be very quickly going into lunch. Please be clear about your practice. I would imagine the guided meditations and the mindful movements this afternoon will help reinforce what we're doing. So we are practicing mindfulness of the mind in the way that the Buddha has taught us. Mindfulness of these mental formations.